So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Russell Frank. And I've been working with Pete Delapella and Kevin Maston on this project called Curling Ice Quality Improvement Project. And about, I guess it was a year ago, August, we were discussing what we could do around arena clubs. How could we help them get better ice, and concluded that one of the ways we could help them get better ice is to help more clubs transition from arena ice to dedicated ice. And so this meeting originally set up to just try to have a conversation with some of the people that attended both trainings or one or both of those trainings, trying to figure out what we would do next. And so I guess part of this idea was to have a conversation with you all about whether we keep going and just what is it we'd present? Do we just bring in more clubs that have transitioned? Are there topics that people are particularly interested in or think that should be part of a curriculum? So that's partly what we're trying to figure out here, whether it's worth having a training around writing a business plan or putting together a feasibility study. So what are you all thinking based on what you've been doing? Do you have any ideas?
So this is Rick Nasman from the Curling Club of the Berkshires. We've been we're into our second year of a capital campaign. We're an arena club looking to hopefully transition to a dedicated facility. And we've currently have pledged roughly $325,000 of funds towards a dedicated facility. We're going through the ropes of, either finding a place to lease or finding a lot to build or an existing building to take over, kind of coming up short. But one of the things that we've always been not struggling with, and I don't know if other arena clubs might find this helpful, is that as we look at let's just say a new lot, new site to develop a facility, whether it's 2 sheets, 3 sheets, 4 sheets, if there's any other resources that we can have access to, whether it's other dedicated facilities that have design plans of their facilities, whether they're recent facilities that they've constructed, but if they literally have plans that might be available to clubs to utilize, to either, somewhat give to a contractor to say, hey, this is a curling club, give us some budget costs. Because right now where we're at is, we've got money to put towards a property or potentially a lease. But if we look to build right now, the white elephant is, what is that building going to cost? And I realize with the economy, with COVID, dollars have changed, but basically we don't have a floor plan to even kind of take to somebody to say, this is what what we're thinking of. So if there are other clubs out there that have plans that they're willing to share, for other, folks looking for dedicated facilities, that would be great. If they're in hard copy, I'm sure clubs would be willing to pay to get copies. If they're CAD files, electronic, probably better yet. But one of the things we kind of, I don't want to say struggled with, but we're going down the path of, well, do you just build the bare minimum? Do you just basically put in, 2 sheets and have the compressors and have ice and then worry about putting in a bar and locker rooms and all that stuff, but just get ice, because that's what attracts people. So, as one model, just here is the Yugo version. And then maybe, another one that's, I'll say mid-size, the Chevy version is, might have bathrooms and locker rooms and a bar, and then you got the Cadillac that's got the kitchen and all that other stuff. But I think if there might happen to be plans available through either other clubs, dedicated clubs, or even as a group, if there's somebody who can develop draft plans of those type of facilities, I would find that helpful from our perspective.
Hey, Rick,
Yeah.
Bill Marshall, Palmetto Curling Club. I believe Charlotte Curling Club has their plans on their website.
That is correct.
they-
Yeah, I've downloaded theirs as well. They do have
Yeah,
theirs on their
they are
website.
very willing to share their story and their plans and make anything they have available.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you for that.
So Rick, I can think of a couple different reasons to have these things. One is it helps just to have a floor plan, to have an idea of what you're really talking about. Then there's having plans that you can use to go get a bid, which might be quite different than just a
Right.
floor plan and a drawing. Are you just thinking about the phase you're in right now, that you guys are at that point where, boy, if you had some drawings, then you could start getting some idea what it's going to cost?
Yeah, that's primarily it. We had a meeting with a local contractor, basically Butler building, Morton building type contractor in the area, and described what we're looking for, the rough dimensions, but they're able to spitball something, but until we give them something with a little more detail, a little more meat on the bones, it's going to be tough for them to get in the probably anything less than within a 30% margin of accuracy. So just having something a little more detail that we could give to them to say, here it is. What are we looking at here? That way we can put our full financial package together for complete funding purposes.
It's Bill again. I understand the idea of starting small and building out. The question I'd have there is, or the thought I'd have there is, make sure you plan your infrastructure for your end game. The amount of power load you're going to have, the utilities you're going to put in, and then build to that. Build the outside frame, and then for the things that you can do yourself, like build the bar, the warm room, restrooms, things like that, come in afterwards. But you certainly need, I would think you need your basic footprint plus your hard utilities as your initial base.
Yeah, good point, Bill. And that's something, we've heard, I'll say time and time again, and we definitely have on our radar, future expansion. So that is already ingrained in our thought pattern here. So yes, thanks for reinforcing that.
Our biggest challenge for us, we've got the membership. We've had a capital campaign a while back, but we've recycled we've refreshed probably 90% of our membership since then. They come in for a while and play and then leave. But our challenge, I think, is how do you get from having some money in the bank ready to launch to actually being able to commit with a financial institution, or not us commit, but have the financial institution commit with us on putting a finance package together. That's kind of where we are. It's when you're going out to buy a house, you go to see your banker and you say, how much house can I afford? And they look at your income and they look at your debt, and then they say, okay, we'll sign a check for you up to $500,000 or up to $1 million, whatever it might be. That's where we need to get to, because the buildings that we've been looking at to put a mat system in under a lease arrangement, they're gone within a few days. So we need to be able to react very quickly when we find something, not, oh, we're ready to go, but oh, hang on, the bank's not going to talk to us, or we now need to go talk to a bank.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, and something that we've kind of had to deal with as well. We went through our capital campaign and we've been fortunate enough to, to this point, basically have a couple $100,000 in the bank, with another 100,000 plus, committed over the next year, another year and a half. So, because we're in that position, if we did happen to find a lot that we felt, would be a nice site for, to build something, we didn't have the funds to buy the lot. So we really needed some infusion of money just to be able to react, and whether it's a lot or whether it's a lease type basis, some I'll call play money, if you will. So we have that, and we do have a business plan developed. We haven't yet talked to banks about it, but it's more of, we feel we've got the infrastructure of the business plan put together so that we could take that to some financing group to show them, what we're thinking of. But depending upon whether we're building, buying a lot, or leasing, that's kind of the wild card at this point. And until we can identify that, we haven't approached anybody as far as, filling out the rest of the funding for us.
Right. Are you able to share that plan offline?
I don't see why not.
Okay, thank you.
Bill,
So,
could you tell me what curling club you're with again?
Palmetto Curling Club, Greenville, South Carolina.
That's very good. Thank you.
so Bill and Rick, so neither of you guys have approached any banks at this point in time?
No.
We have not. We're at the point of I'll call resurrecting a financial team to actually build a serious plan on how to, you've got your design, find, build team ready to go and chomping at the bit. We need to get the finance team in behind there to shore up the dollars. Because everybody's ready to talk about number of sheets and what the warm room is going to look like, but but how do you
What color the
translate?
carpet's going to be?
Yeah.
Yeah, the color of the carpet. Anyway,
Well, that's good that people are thinking ahead, actually, but so, all right. So it seems to me that there's a couple pieces to this pie, all right? One is, as a club, just being able to generate more revenue than your expenses are just when you're curling, right? You're renting ice, you're collecting money. In some way, shape, or form, you've got to start to build up a bank account. And just as somebody gave the example of, when you're whatever age and decide you want to go buy a house, you've got to go to the bank and you better have a certain amount of money there to cover what would be considered your down payment, or enough money that shows that you're financially able to commit to such a long-term commitment. And the same is true in the situation you all are in your curling clubs. Now, a lot of curling clubs are not for profits, set up that way basically because it allows you to accept donations, tax-free, right? Tax credit donations. So, but that can present a bit of a conundrum when you go to the bank. Now, in Buffalo, their situation was they weren't really ready to do anything. All right, they were playing, good membership, had a pretty good chunk of money in the bank. I'm not exactly sure how they raised it, but raised it. And then all of a sudden, one day, they ran into a building. That's what got them going like instantaneously. And so for them, they were ready to commit on a lease. It looked good to them. Their problem was the bank.
Yeah.
So when they went to the bank liked their business plan. The bank did not like that they were a not-for-profit.
Yeah.
So they ran into this conundrum where it was hard for the bank to kind of get a grasp of what was going on there. And they eventually convinced the bank that they would be a good risk based on who was on their board and what was their experience in their other lives. All right. They actually had to do a little selling finally ran into a bank that was willing to listen to him and convince the bank that they were just like in any other business. They just happened to be a not-for-profit. And got a pretty significant bank loan to help them basically bare bones it into a lease situation in an old China factory. So from that perspective, I think their experience was it's going to be a little slow with the bank. They had maybe, I think, $50,000 to $70,000 in cash, and then got the rest in a loan. All right. And they had been, one of their guys had been wandering around looking at equipment just on his own. Like I said, they didn't have a committee working on this. It just all of a sudden, the building is what generated it. Once that building appeared and somebody said, hey, here's a good location, they just ran with the ball over a short period of time.
How long ago was that, Russell?
Probably 5 years. I'd
And that was
say,
Buffalo?
yeah. I'd probably say 2015, something like that. I can go back and check my notes, but it was not too long ago, and it happened fairly quickly.
So
So
the nugget there is make sure you seed your board of directors with the right profiles.
that's absolutely true. Although a lot of clubs are so small, okay, it's hard to actually do that task. But I would agree, you really do need to pay some attention when you're getting to that point, because I think other clubs are going to run into the same thing. Now, I know like Mayfield, I'm not sure what they did at Triangle, but I think Triangle did the same thing, which basically relied on members to somehow co-sign loans, guarantee loans, loan them money, okay? And that's how they proceeded rather than going to a commercial entity like a bank.
I think Triangle as well, they purchased an oversized lot and sold some of that back.
Good
They had
strategy.
they had an opportunity there.
Russell, have many of the clubs had luck with the banks? Like I would think a lot of nonprofits would have a tough time raising money from the bank. So can you just, we're kind of in our infancy in this, and I'm not on our board, so some of this may have already been answered, but Bill asked me to help. I've done a couple capital campaigns for other nonprofits here in town. I'm just curious, like, do people start with getting the money? Or do you start with getting the location? Do you buy equipment throughout the way on opportunistic buys? Because someday inevitably you're going to have to buy that. You could always resell that, I guess, if you bought it at the right price and you didn't get the dedicated. But what comes first? Like, do you get the money first? Do you start lining that up, or where do you go?
So the clubs I've talked to, I don't know, probably 6 or 8, I would say. A couple of them just shoestringed it right at jump. Just, I would say what Craig Fisher did in his first leap, and then what happened in Cincinnati, and probably at least one other club where they just said, okay, we're doing this, all right? And we're going to lease the building and we'll buy it, we'll get it as cheap as we can. And when opportunity arose and they had a little cash, they just jumped in and did it. So I know that's what they did in Cincinnati and in Buffalo. Then other people have taken a much more longer term approach to this. And so like Triangle, I think Mayfield would be 2 examples where they've kind of thought it through. And I think that in a way, they probably were pretty confident that they were going to be able to get some financial guarantees or financial support from their membership. And then at whatever point in time they had those numbers that looked good, you know, it's just like when you're buying a house, there's a point where, okay, I've got enough down payment, I've got a commitment for the bank from X amount, now I can really start shopping around. But I don't think there's any one way that people have approached this. It just seems like until you get to that point where you've got cash or a guarantee of enough credit to be able to proceed with either a build or a purchase, okay? I think it's a bit, people are doing exactly what all of you have done, is go around, gather some information, meet in your groups, take some steps forward, figure out what else you're missing in terms of information. And then once you're feeling confident and you've got some cash, then I think people are just going forward. And then it's you know, like I said, somebody pointed out Charlotte's left a lot of stuff on their website. I haven't really looked through it. It was kind of a little overwhelming to me, but it certainly could be helpful for what any of you are asking about. I suspect there's other clubs that have plans that are just sitting on shelves. Haven't used them or did use them, and they're just sitting there, and that certainly could be valuable to some people. It seems some standard drawings for a 2-sheet, 3-sheet, and a 4-sheet club might be helpful just for clubs to be able to grab at any point in time. But it seems to be like a one-off operation. Everybody sets up their committees differently. Some people have big groups, some people have small. You know, I don't think there's any actual one way that people are going about this.
Yeah.
But I do think the critical factor is, at what point can you decide you've got enough cash to move ahead? And I think people are probably done it in a very risky way at times.
I would agree with that, Russell, you know, that there's probably no one right way, unless you've got the one donor that's got the big check that's going to write that big check for the entire club. But just to share what we did here at Pearl Berkshires, or where we're at, is we've been an arena club for about 5 years, but what we've been able to do over the past 5 years is we have 4 sheets on the hockey rink. So we've got 4 sets of rocks, which we started renting from the GNCC originally. We ended up buying 2 sets from a club that went under up in Canada. And then GNCC ended up turning I'll call it their loan rental program into an offer to buy the stones. I think it was last year, maybe 2 years ago. So we bought the remaining 2 sets. So we own 4 sets of stones. So, you know, as you're talking with banks or what have you, you know, having cash in the bank is obviously a good thing for a down payment. But we've also got some hard assets, meaning the stones, which, you know, probably in totality are, you know, 15, 16 grand worth of stones. We also happen to we bought a scraper from a club that went under up in Canada, had it refurbished. We don't use it at the arena club, but we've got it. It works. It's an electric one. We need to get it converted to battery. But again, there's another asset. And then some other smaller ones. So, you know, it's just not only do we have some cash, but we've also got some hard assets that we could show a bank that we don't have to be buying equipment and so forth. Once we have the ice, we've basically got everything to curl. We just need a location. So just picking away at it. And with just kind of getting into our capital fund. So we did our capital fund through our members. We have probably when we started, it was about 50 member arena club. And we did a capital campaign just through our members without having any site or any location, you know, identified. Basically put out a Hail Mary to the members saying, you know, we want to build a club. Are you willing to donate? And fortunately, we were able to get about $325,000 in pledges over a 3-year period. We're about halfway through that. So we've already got about 200,000 in the bank. But that was based on not having anything solid, concrete of a location, of building a site. We can't even point to anything to say this is where the curling club is going to be. So now that we've done that, you know, we're continuing to look for sites or places to lease, so on and so forth. But one of the other things that we kind of made a decision, I'd like to get kind of your folks' opinion on, is we have not taken our capital fund campaign any further as far as going out to the general public or anybody else outside of our membership, because we felt, you know, it's tough to go out to the general public and say, please donate. Again, we don't have a place to point to. We don't have a lot. We don't have a, you know, future lease agreement for a location. So to go out to a greater group of people to say, please contribute or donate, we didn't feel was right. So we're kind of holding off until we do find a spot, a site or a place to lease before we do that. So just wanted to kind of get folks' opinions of whether that's
Rick,
or whether.
I have a question before the others jump in on that. In terms of the pledges, and I'm Kathy from Ocean State, by the way.
Oh, heck yeah.
In terms of the pledges you've gathered from your members and the actual funds that you've already put in the bank, are there any terms associated with that? If within X amount of time the plan doesn't move forward, are those funds returned, or how do you manage that kind of limbo period with that?
Great question. So yes, we do have, we asked for basically unrestricted funds. And I would say probably, and I'm just spitballing it here, 90% of the funds that were pledged were, unrestricted funds. We did get a couple folks that did put some conditions on it. And I'm just trying to see here. So somebody made a condition of they're initially going to give, I'll just say $50,000, out of the gate, but then another 75,000 will be pledged or physically check cut once we find a physical viable facility. So, it's kind of the carrot that's dangling out there. And then I think that we've got one other that said, basically, if not operational within 5 years, donors can request contributions returned. So I think we've got two of them with some sort of restriction on it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So Rick, this is Eric with the Long Island Curling Club. I wish I was in your position right now. We're at the spot, we have about $180,000 in funds. The way I'm looking at it, we have to get to about, we need about 140,000 more before we can start looking at sites. I'm looking at, we have to get about 70%. And for me, once we're at that point, when we're looking at sites, is where I'm thinking we can start going out and asking people outside of the club. But I guess my question to you, Rick, is what did you put out to start getting those donations, especially in those amounts? But, what, like your request to the members, I'd love to see what you did to request that, because that's kind of one of the things. My background is an architect and a facilities project manager. So getting the budget to me was the easy part. Everything else here to me is difficult.
Yeah, I hear you, Eric. And I'm a civil engineer myself, so I fully understand your position and feelings on this. So, and I do happen to have another board member of ours, Yo, who's part of this call here, and she can certainly chime in if I forget something. But basically, what we did was we had our business plan that we had developed, and we basically just put out emails to our membership saying we'd like to start a capital fund drive because we just, this arena ice is just not really fun. And I think, we do travel to other dedicated facilities so people know what dedicated ice can be. So, we said we're committed to wanting to build a dedicated facility. We need your help. We had meetings with members. We asked them to attend a meeting in which we presented our business plan, got their input, but basically said we're looking for, your commitment, and we're going to be putting out a pledge program, and we're asking you to pledge over a 3-year period. And please consider, making your donation based, kind of from your heart. We pulled all the heartstrings on this thing. But let me just step back. Before we did that, we did actually go out and we did put out an anonymous pledge. I'll say donation, to all the members. Just, we're basically, it was, we're kind of decision time here, whether we stick with arena ice or we move on to dedicated, and, dedicated, we need the commitment. So if we were able to move forward with that, what would you, we're not going to hold you to it, and you make basically an anonymous pledge, but what would you be willing to pledge over 3 years? And I think at that point we had commitments of $240,000 that people said they would be willing to pledge. again, that was not holding them to it. That was just,
Mhm.
if you could, that's, so that gave us basically the impetus to move forward. We said, wow, this really is impressive. People are committed. So let's keep pushing forward. So when we did get to our, kind of our member capital campaign, and we had our meeting, we told them, what the numbers were, and we're moving forward with the True Capital campaign. Now we're going to, ask for pledges, and these are committed. You will be, held accountable. We ended up with $325,000. So,
Yeah,
know.
and there was a little thing called COVID in between those two appeals. So we actually had that first appeal like a month before COVID. And then we sort of put it on hold, and then we put it back out there, and we're pretty worried, and we did pretty well.
So a couple of questions come up for me. One is if you could share the documents that you guys threw together. You can either send them to me and I'll put them in a PDF and send them back out to all these people, or just
Okay.
share with everybody on this email. So, and at some point it'd be helpful, I think, for people to know just what was the breakdown of how many members did you have at what point in time, how many people gave, and how much were they giving? Because you've got quite a bit of cash there over a short period of time, would be my observation. That's a good thing, actually. Okay, you're probably not anywhere near where you want to be, but that's a pretty good chunk of change for what you've got. It seems like. So your earlier question to me was, how do you ask if you don't really have a facility or whatever? And so at least up here, hockey rinks were built by basically people doing just that. I mean, having bake sales, little things, raising money. That's how they created one in Waterbury, Vermont, and another one in Morrisville, Vermont. And basically, it was asking people to support something. Most of the parents of little kids were helping generate that. All right. So to a certain degree, I think you can go out and ask community for support for something you're trying to do. I think you have to kind of just think it through about how you talk about it as a community resource and something that will benefit the community, not just that, oh, okay, you're going to help us build a building.
Yeah, Rick, how many members do you have?
This year, I think we just hit the 60 mark. So, I'll say, knock on wood, we've been very fortunate. We started out probably in the 30s when we started out in 2016, I think it was. And even through COVID, we've, gained numbers even through COVID. So, we've been starting out in probably the mid 30s was our first year, and we're currently at 60.
And where are you located?
Pittsfield, Massachusetts.
Okay. And another question, the pledges, are these donations, or are you running a loan program as well?
These are all donations, tax deductible. We're nonprofit.
Okay, so can a member provide a donation for deductions for something that they're going to benefit from?
We had our attorney indicate that this wasn't anything that there's, it wasn't as though they necessarily, it's not like they got a membership out of it.
Mm-hmm.
If they're paying for membership, that's something they get benefit out of. This was a donation towards a capital item.
Mm-hmm.
So, our understanding was that was tax deductible. Somebody could say, well, I'll give you, I'll give you $10,000 for a lifetime membership. I don't think that's tax deductible.
Right.
But for a
But if it's
capital, for an
for-
asset, physical, structure or piece of property, our understanding, all that is tax deductible.
It might be different by area, Michael, but like if you donate money to a theater, you can still go to the play.
Right.
Technically you're benefiting, but you're using the product. The donation doesn't mean you're still going to use it or not. Whether you get the member, you'd still get the write-off. I'm more interested. Look, there's no doubt, Rick, so it's impressive that you got it without a facility, but it's been my experience, to raise money on just regular donations for anything is difficult. Capital campaigns are easier because you can show somebody this is what it would look like. So rather you take a artist rendering or actual video of another club, let's take Charlotte on the high end, and I don't know what a low end club would be. Let's just say Fort Wayne. It's a lovely club, but just from a size or facility or whatever, so you could take that out and show it to people. It's easier to raise money because I'm going to show them this is what it's going to look like. And whether it's big time sponsors or just the donations at 1,000 at a time that can really help you get there. I think it's important for us anyway, Bill, this is just my opinion, that, we've got to be ready and serious about moving forward before we go out and knocking on doors, particularly the community doors, right? We don't want to go knock on Michelin or BMW's door, which everybody does, as you know, from being there, without having something to show for it. And there's no doubt we can't just let that money sit in the bank for 4 months. Now, COVID was a completely different scenario. And so I'm sure people would have expected to sit there that long, but you got to have some sort of time horizon to use it. So I think it starts with how much do you need to raise? And then you're right, Russell, I'd love to see a map of everybody in any way, in every way that anybody ever tried to raise money. And whether it worked or didn't, it may work in our marketplace. And what worked for you might not work for us, vice versa. But I would love to know any of the creative ways people did to raise money. Like I sent you an email the other day, don't know if you got it, wondering if any club hired a third party come in and raise money for them. Now that third party gets a little piece of it, which is a decision the board of the club will have to make, is it worth it or not. But we went from dinking around trying to raise, 200 grand to be able to raise $1 million because we brought in that hired gun, for example, not curling, but a different organization together. Have you ever heard of anybody doing that?
I have not, but I wouldn't say that hasn't happened. I know one club that hired a consultant and paid their consultant to give them some guidance about how to fundraise. I mean, I think that certainly it's really helpful that your members are donating to your cause. Okay, that's definitely critical in being able to walk around and start talking to other people about trying to get money. It is hard to get money, but I think part of it has to do with how you fit in your community. What's that kind of community infrastructure that you have, the connections you have. I remember working in a small not-for-profit that had some financial problems. They didn't have enough money coming in, and so we needed to raise some money pretty quickly, and we did it through like a raffle. But we had business people that were willing to hustle the raffle. Okay, that people knew how to go out and actually sell tickets. Okay, that's what they did. All right, and that made that work. So the same way you can see, if you look at some big institutions, museums number one, that they often entertain capital campaigns and ask people to commit dollars, millions of dollars, okay, to put additions on buildings and all kinds of things. That isn't going to happen for 5 or 8 years. So there are people that are committing money and knowing that there's some guarantee down the road that you're going to get what you put your money in there for, okay? On the community side, 2 interesting things I think that I've heard of at different times. One this fall with what Craig was doing with autistic kids. Now, that's a nice piece of business to be in your community, connected to a population that's underserved and needs assistance, whatever, okay? So that he could run a little fundraiser and offer that as a community service to provide curling to autistic kids. Easier to do once you're set up in a dedicated facility than if you're in an arena facility. But there are some ways you can get your way in the front door, all right? So in Vermont here, we had been, our club had been working with the local mental health center and eventually the Rotary Club. So it started out, the local mental health center was interested in doing a fundraiser and they wanted to do curling. And so we help them do that basically as a club. And they raised quite a bit of money doing that, all right? So to me, if there was a way to do something like that and work out a 50-50 deal, okay, where you get some, they get some, okay? Doing some sort of benefit, or even at the local football game, if they have a 50-50 drawing, you're trying to get in on that once a year. It's just, this is how you raise money for getting to this future of your facility. So I think there's ways to look around at what goes in your community and figure out different ways you can. Another club was raising a pretty good significant chunk of change, having a raffle of a, like a 4x4. Now that's something you got to be careful about as to where you live, what people use, who's your audience, who would buy tickets. But I was kind of surprised how much money somebody raised just selling it, raffling off a 4x4. All right. So there are some ways to kind of move ahead with this stuff. And those are some of the stories I've heard. I'm sure there's more out there, but I think that most people are struggling somewhere between hoping that somebody with $1 million comes along and joins their club, okay, to the struggle of how do we raise this, $1,000 at a time? How are we going to get there?
Eric, you had mentioned when you were sharing your information that you had 180K, you're looking at 140 more, and then you said something about 70%. What was that?
Yeah, so we're looking at it, once we get to about the 70% point, we could start looking at sites. Because when we actually get to the point where we look at sites, then I can get drawings for it, and we can actually have something real to get that last 30%. And my belief is once you have that, getting that last 30% should be a lot easier with the actual drawings.
So you're
Because the
saying
excitement
70% is your project cost.
So,
So 70% of your project.
Or is that just for
Yes.
site?
that's for the 70% of our overall project cost. So our board wants us to have 1 year's worth, basically 1 year's rent, plus the cost of construction, which makes it a little, I understand their conservative nature of it, but it makes it more difficult. So 70% of when you combine the construction cost and the 1 year's of rent.
What are you looking at as your end game in terms of what you'll have? Is it a leased facility with a mat system, or
Yeah,
leased
facility, leased with the mat. I had reached out to Jim Hibbard. I got quotes from him for a 2 or 3 sheet club, just basically to just put in the mats only. And then I put some assumptions and general assumptions for if it was going to be a warehouse space of what we would need. So obviously you're not going to know the real dollar until you actually look at sites, but this gives us a goal to shoot for. And then once we get that, we know how close I am on the budget wise of, are we at 70%, 65%? It almost doesn't matter, because once you get to that point, you start doing drawings. That's when, at least we hope, we could pull everybody else in for that last 30%.
Okay, thank you.
What was that number, Eric?
Eric?
So, hold on, let me get to I'm looking at needing 480. Hold on, I'm pulling it up right now. Yeah, I'm looking at needing about 480. I have construction, my assumption is needing about 354,000 for a 2-sheet club, or 396 for a 3-sheet. And then when you're adding in the rent for a 2-sheet, 480,000, for a 3-sheet, 572,000. And again, a lot of the construction, the basis of the construction costs were from Jim Hibbard, which I got from you guys, getting me just the price of getting the mat system out there. And then, again, everything else is just general assumptions on building, just the rest of the build out.
When you're in your assumptions, in terms of the space you're looking at, what kind of budget of dollars per square foot per year are you targeting?
I reached out to JLL, they're like a real estate company around us. I to just give me a sample site, and that came out to $16.70 a square foot.
Thank you.
And I have for a 2C club, my minimum square foot requirements was about 7,500. It'll probably be a little more. For my 3 sheet, I have a minimum of 10,500.
And when you figure in the square footage, the per square foot cost, is the landlord paying for everything else, or are you paying part of property taxes or other upkeep about the building?
That, well, that part, it would just be paying the square foot, that,
Okay, that's
that
fine.
all get included in that square foot cost, yeah.
That's fine. Okay.
And I apologize, I'm gonna show my ignorance here. When you're saying mat, tell me what you mean by mat system. I think I've heard this before where it's still ice, but I hear mat and I think it's something different. What's
So
the,
there's a couple different mat systems out there, so that what it'll let you do is when you watch people play hockey in a football stadium, that's basically what they're doing. They have, some of them are rollout mats, all right? So it might be 15 feet wide and 145 feet wide, long, okay? And you just roll a bunch of them out, hook them all up, hook them up to a compressor system, and you've got ice. So in a hot curling rink, people have been using these. At first, when people started going into a lease facility, I think the first one was a rollout mat that they threw on sand, all right? So there's one that's called Calmac, and then there's another one called ISS. And they're slightly different. There's probably a third one, but I don't know of any other names. So Jim Hibbert uses Calmac. Mayfield put in the ISS one. I think the ISS one was about 45K a sheet delivered.
Danny, there's a great video, University of Georgia. If I find the link, they essentially started playing hockey in one of their rec halls and laid it right over a carpet.
okay, yeah, send that to me. I'm looking up ISS now, a couple of the other ones, so I get a feel for what you're saying. So what is Columbus and Fort Wayne, or those, does anybody know by chance?
What do you want to know?
What ice system is that?
So they,
Fort Wayne's a mat system.
yeah, it's Fort Wayne has a Calmac mat system in there, all right?
Okay,
So those are basically the two main ones, because Jim Hibbert's pushing Calmac, okay? And USA Curling has been pushing ISS. So, and it's just, they're two different systems, different approaches slightly, how they go about it. ISS is a German system. So Broomstones, Schenectady, where else? Possibly Cape Cod. I think they've all got Calmac systems in them now.
Okay.
So some people are just throwing them on top of concrete. Okay, and that's part of it, is now that you can get away with just throwing this down on a sand base. They look white, so you don't actually have to paint them. They don't look the same as if the ice is painted, but it's close enough so you don't have to muck around with white paint. So there's some things about them that make them easier. You can take them with you if you want to go.
that's very helpful. And Eric, the numbers are helpful. Thank you. But what is Charlotte, Russell?
Charlotte's just another dedicated club. I don't know how old it
Oh,
is.
is that a mat? Is that considered mat? Because I've been
No.
there.
I don't
No,
know.
they're not
I don't
mat.
think so. I think they're a concrete floor. Pittsburgh's a concrete floor, I believe. Triangle, I believe, is a concrete floor. North Fork's a concrete floor.
What you're doing is essentially, Danny, what you're doing is essentially putting your glycol lines in the concrete. Whereas a mat system, your glycol lines are rolled out and laying on top of the concrete. And what you have to watch for there is you don't build up permafrost and leaving your mat system up on a warehouse that was not designed to have cold temperatures on it 24/7, 365.
I get you. So if you're not building a facility, or anybody, I guess, if you're renting a facility, you almost have to go mat system so you could take it
Yes,
with you if you go.
you can't really do it any other way.
I got you. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And then if you go to the Broomstones Curling Club webpage. There'll be a big photo on the face page, okay, looking down at the ice. All right, it's wet when it was during a flood, but you'll be able to see the piping in it. And that's a CalMax system.
In Washington?
No, no, Broomstones in Wayland, Vermont, or Wayland, Massachusetts. So a couple other things people asked about. Somebody asked about feasibility study. And has anybody on this call done a feasibility study?
Feasibility in terms of what? In terms
Well,
of whether you can do it or what it would look like?
Yeah, I don't know, but that was the same question that came to me is, you know, what is it you need to know is feasible? What are you unsure about? The whole project, or whether you can build versus rent, or, you know, so it seems to me that that's part of it. They were looking for how to raise money for it. I'm not sure how you would raise money for that, actually. I think that's a bit of a challenge. I actually think you might be able to get a university business school to do a feasibility study for you. I'm not sure that's possible, but it really just depends on the university around where you are and who's teaching some courses. But depending on what you wanted to know, I suspect that it'd be hard to find somebody who could do a feasibility study for you. I suspect that people would be relying on what they could find from other people, unless you were in a curling club. So somebody had asked about specific operating costs after you get going, and I think all that was included in the talk that Craig gave. Somebody else asked about affiliations with a standalone club, affiliate with municipal ice rinks. It's a mix or match. I mean, it seems like it depends where you are, and you know, some people have done that and affiliated with municipal places, others have not. I don't know that it's an easy thing to do. Anybody have any experience with that?
Kind of backing off that question, do you know of any clubs that have not necessarily partnered with municipality to build a shared structure, but have gotten some kind of municipal funds to build or refit their own facility? That's one of the things we're looking at with the Des Moines Curling Club, trying to figure out if we can get money from the city or the county as like a recreation grant.
That might be a bit hard, but if you can show how you're going to meet the needs of a certain population in the city, then they might be able to help you a little bit about that. Most likely what the things that I've heard were situations where people were taking advantage of, in one area I know, the hockey rink leases ice from the city. They pay $1 a year for the lease. So that's pretty cheap land when you're talking about the size of a hockey rink. Nutmeg, actually, their curling facility is attached to the hockey rink, and they actually use their compressor system. But they've got sort of an odd, unusual situation. I can't think of any other ones here that I can think of, in New England anyways.
What curling club is that?
Nutmeg,
Nutmeg.
Connecticut.
Mhm.
But I don't know exactly what their relationship is, but they're in like a park area and they're attached to a hockey rink. And like I said, they share their compressor system with a hockey rink.
We're in a almost the bridesmaid, never the bride situation. We've talked with and worked with a couple of different groups that were wanting to put in hockey facilities, and we would partner with them, but it always kind of came right up to the edge of the, okay, let's start moving forward, and then the discussion stopped for whatever reason. We also looked at redevelopment areas where what do you call it? A developer is coming in to redevelop old mill sites with condos, brew pubs, and a hockey rink. You know, those kind of things. Again, bridesmaid, never the bride. Came right up to the edge, and then, you know, developer changed or went out of business, or, you know.
Yeah, we're looking at a similar situation where someone, a nonprofit is putting in a new hockey rink and has the opportunity to build alongside the curling facility. So um, your story is not encouraging.
Where is that, Michael?
It's in southern Maine or mid-coast Maine.
I'd say the hockey rink's probably going to take off. You just need to figure out how to plug in.
Oh, exactly. And that's what we're trying to work towards. It's difficult, with two different nonprofit organizations trying to share and have a common vision and then come out with a plan. I can see, like you say, how it can fail at the end. So
It's hard to make sure that everybody's on the same page, because usually you start off on slightly different pages. But
exactly.
Potomac,
exactly.
so I was in Potomac 2 weeks ago, and I don't know what their situation is, but they're attached to a municipal facility, okay? And they talked about actually having built the building themselves, which is like an addition onto this other hockey rink. I mean, so that would be another, folks. I don't know exactly how they did it, all right? But it just came up in the conversation when I was visiting with them that they had built the building. So
This is which club?
Potomac,
Potomac.
yeah. Which surprised me. I mean, it looks like just a four-sheeter that was built when they built the hockey rink, but I don't think that's the case.
Oh my.
Yeah,
How much was this Broomstones in Mass? What do you think that facility cost today with that mat system?
I'm gonna say compressors, new compressor system, and a new mat system, maybe 200, but I could ask and see
Yeah.
what they have to say.
Okay.
Again, it was full compressor system. Take out the old stuff, put in the new stuff.
Danny, we've got the costs of towards the back end of COVID for 3 and 4 sheet. I'm going to say we're right and kind of in where Eric was for 3 to 4 sheet. Well, actually 4 sheet, we were talking around 450,000 plus about 100,000 upfit of a building, plus 100,000 run cost to have it in the bank for the coming year. So we're right at what was, I didn't do the math there, 700,000. Pretty close. Now you add COVID on top of that, it's now 8 or 850.
Okay.
So that's kind of the numbers we're looking at. Pittsburgh put their system in just before COVID, new facility, purpose built, and they were rated, I think, 1.2 or 1.3 million.
Say
And
that.
Danny,
you
I can share that we priced a mat system 4 sheets, and this would be in Mid-Coast, Maine. It's a local company, and it was the mat system installation itself with the compressor included was 250,000.
4 sheets.
4 sheets, yeah.
So I'm looking for something else here that I have to take a minute to find. Thought I had out here, but. All right. Justine, can you let me share my screen? All right, guess I can't do that. So one of the things that got me a little bit concerned about club size was Michael's club, Pine Tree, had gathered a bunch of information on clubs that had transitioned in, I don't know, 2012, 13, 14, and what were their membership as it went along. And I think I sent it to you all in an email. It says transition to get dedicated ICE memberships and fees. And I have to say that a lot of these clubs, with the exception of Denver, you know, 4-sheet clubs, well, Beaverton's 3 sheets, they've got 235. Denver's 4 sheets, they expect to have 430. Most of 4 sheets have 200 or less. And that doesn't seem like a lot of members to support a 4-sheet club to me. Now, I know Fort Wayne, and I think Buffalo also do very well with corporate sponsorship. And so they use that to replace the revenue they would have from increased membership. But in the club I was curling in Quebec, I think we had 170 for 2 sheets. They had a little bit of room to grow. Not a lot, but some. You know, Broomstones were 350 or 360 for a 4-sheet club. So I would rather have a 2-sheet club with 170 members than a 4-sheet club with 200. So I think you have to think through, how much did these clubs actually grow? I guess that's my point, is when you look at that document, and I updated as best as I could, but it just seems like there's a long haul to actually build your membership. And I don't see many clubs other than Bowling Green and Denver really having cut it really quick. You know, Denver's over 400 or close to 400, which seems to me, some people think 100 a sheet. That seems a bit tight, but so I just think you have to kind of look and see what's happened so far with these clubs that have transitioned, and how are they able to boost their membership in terms of looking at what you're going to have in your business plan that says this is where we'll be 2 or 3 years after we build it.
Which email, Russell, did you have those assumptions in?
You know what? I'll look and see, but I'll send it back out to this list again when we're
All
done.
right, thank you.
Okay? And it's just, you know, took what was in Pine Tree's business plan. I thought it was kind of interesting information, and then tried to update it as of last fall. Okay? And then Craig Fisher included some of his membership numbers in his slides when he did his talk. But again, it's just a function of, you know, how much sponsorship can you generate, you know, in your club, hanging on your walls, and then how much corporate rentals can you do? If you can do quite a few, then that'll bring up your revenue compared to maybe having members. So it just depends on what your mix is.
So Russell, make sure I understand what you're saying. So you're saying that many of these clubs' membership did not grow much at all, or at least enough to support from where they were before they had dedicated ICE to after that. So if they were 180 members pre-dedicated, they only grew to like 200 dedicated. So is the issue to do dedicated or not because it doesn't grow, or the number of sheets?
To me, it speaks to what's your number of sheets? How much curling space do you need for how many members? All right. And so to me, so the way people would talk about it, and we certainly talked about it at our club that way, it was like, oh yeah, all we got to do is build it and people will show up. Lots of people like curling. And there's some truth to that. At the same time, I'm just saying, when I look at it in some pretty big metropolitan areas, they don't look close to full. And I admit that COVID hit in between. I would say that's true, but I would just say, often people say, oh yeah, just build it and people will come. Well, you know, if you're not full, I know one club where they're definitely not full and they're happy at not being full. Their members like it that way. And it's fine, they're paying more to play, but it's working for them. But it's just that's the piece of it. Like up in here in Vermont, I think people that think, we're thinking, well, we could build a 4-sheet club, or we could build a 3-sheet club. And I'm not sure we could sustain a 3-sheet club up here. I think we've got enough space where we could definitely do 2. 3, I think, is probably okay if you could keep up the work. 4 seems an awful lot for this geographic area.
It also depends on where you're getting your, I guess, supplemental income from. If you're doing corporate events, then you're limiting yourself to the size of the corporation you can, or the team that you can sell to. But Danny, one of the piggybacking on your point there, and maybe others can share. I haven't seen any or many arena clubs that get beyond 60 or 70 people because of the unavailability or the lack of availability of ice. And really, for us, we've got 2 draws on one night. So we're very lucky to have 5 hours of ice on consistently year on year, every week during curling season. And we're pretty much maxed out on our growth. So we're sitting this year with I think it's about 75 to 80 people playing. Now, some of that's spares and whatnot, but I think we're right at about that number. Well, 75 people.
Yeah. Russell,
And
good point. There'd be more too baked in there too. Like, I'm just curious, what did they charge on arena ice versus what they charge now on dedicated? I wonder if the price goes up for everybody. Should the price come down when you go to dedicated? You're right, Bill, because I'd hate to have 60, build a dedicated facility and have 120. That's not going to be enough.
So I think if you guys are having 2 draws, you were getting 60 to 70 to 80 members. That's pretty good. We had 2 draws up here, and people were driving an hour to go away from the city, okay, to get to where we curled. All right. But we ended up at about the same number. We had about 75 active kind of curlers. Some were in there every week. Others were 2 draws a week. Some people were just once every 2 or 3 weeks. So I think that's about how far you can get. If you've got another draw a week, you might be able to go up another 30, right? 32. So you can build that way.
Yeah.
But it is one of the challenges of an arena club that access to ice limits how many members you can actually have. And if you've only got 32 regular people playing, if you just think about 10 of those people are on your board, right? Okay, I mean, then just from an administrative person, resources that you can rely on, club support, that having that second draw that can double your membership to 70 really makes a big deal for an arena club, especially as you think about going forward and doing a project like this.
Are there any instances of arena clubs transitioning to dedicated ice and closing? Has that happened? Or have they all managed to continue succeeding in some form or fashion?
I can't say that I know of anyone,
That's good.
but I can't, okay, I'm not gonna say, something happened in LA. There's something going on in LA where that club, Hollywood, my understanding is, has closed down, or they can't get access to their facility. They're in a lease deal. That's what I heard. I don't know that for sure, but that's the only thing I've heard. And so not people struggling. I mean, it's a pretty big leap of faith to jump off. So we were curling in a hockey rink in a town north of Stowe. All right, little town, had built this hockey rink, and then you drive down the road 15 miles and you're in Stowe. Ski town, fairly upscale town. Their rink was deteriorating. And then you drive down the road another 15 miles and you get to Waterbury, and they had just built the rink, okay? based on raising funds for all their little kids, bantam, peewees, whatever. All right. And so Stowe decided instead of not rebuilding their rink, they rebuilt their hockey rink, and the rink in Morrisville basically just went out of business. Okay. It's now a warehouse. All right. So that was a lot of money that a bunch of people in town raised, and then a couple banks loaned them some money. Okay. And eventually that did not work out for them. All right. And like I said, it's a big empty box at the moment. So that's the only one. And then we had another rink up here where somebody built a rink on the north side of Burlington, actually. But I think they were just way underfunded, and they got the rink 99% built, and I think it was only open for a couple months, and that was the end of it. So pretty scary stuff from that perspective. But I'm not, neither one of those seem to be well thought out adventures. I guess I would say that.
Kathleen, I'm not very dialed in, but one of the guys that was down here, and I don't remember if it was Tyler or Jamie up in Canada, but one of them said, what kills it, what kind of hurts a rink once it's up and running is volunteers. It's so hard because you need someone dedicated. It's almost worth budgeting a full-time person to manage the ice, or a part-time person or whatever, some sort of yearly funds. But he said the thing that have closed down a lot of them in Canada, at least out on his end, which I think he lives near Newfoundland or somewhere, is that they just simply couldn't operate them with enough volunteers, and so they consolidated. That's what closed them.
We're just organizing, this is sort of the third effort on the part of Ocean State to explore the idea. So we're just beginning our research process, and we agree that projecting volunteer man hours is just as important as money, because we need to make sure that that work will get done once it exists. Yeah. And as you said, Russell, when 32 of you are curling and some number of that is already committed to all of the work of the club, how do you expand beyond and know that that will exist? That's a question.
I think part of it for arena curlers is really you're trying to, as your members come and go, you want the people who go to still remember the club and keep sort of helping out where the club might be able to go in the future.
I think of them as our alumni.
Correct. No, and that's exactly, it's a good way to think about them, because it is hard to get that base number up. So when people up here were thinking about a 4-sheet club, and I was just at Broomstones, I'd been at Broomstones, I think that was for my second year. And I looked at just the mass of volunteers to keep a 4-sheet club going. The storage space you need just for the bar stuff and kegs. And, okay. I mean, there's a bunch of ancillary things here that people tend to not think much about as to how is your space organized and is it useful? And can you use all that? Do you have enough storage space? Because storage space is really expensive. Okay. Interior space to just stick stuff, and you need space. So it's just hard. And the numbers, Craig, I think mentioned this also, that not only do you need to think about the numbers of people, but what kind of a management structure you're going to have in place. Because it's a really different ball of wax. Okay. All of a sudden you're responsible for the building and maintenance of the building and safety issues and training stuff and a whole bunch of stuff that you weren't doing before. So, but
may I ask one more question while I have you all? As we're reading like manuals about how to plan for your facility and everything, we keep seeing references to if and how your space could be used in the off season to generate income. But I haven't yet seen any real life examples of that being done. Does that happen?
so I think that with mats, you're going to have a problem. All right. Now, with the ISS system, you might be okay, because that's these plastic tiles that are about, I don't know, 18 by 10 or 12, and they all stick together. And you could probably put something, and so then the piping sits inside those tiles. So I think you probably might be able to put something on top of that tile to use that space.
Okay.
they have a weird, at least, if, depending on how it's set up, all right? So that's the key piece. Now in Norfolk, Connecticut, they have a 2-sheet club, all right? And they're right next door to the country club, which is very, very small. I mean, they're a little stinky little town, not a dinky little town. It's a very quaint little town with not a lot of people in it, all right? So the golf course rents their club in the summertime for pickleball.
Uh-huh.
They have just enough with 2 sheets, I guess, that you can play across the sheets. All right, so it's what, 30, 35, 32 feet, something like that. I'm not sure. So, but that's how they do it, all right? You know, the warehouse we were renting, the hockey rink we were renting to play curling in, as soon as the end of February came, we were out, we were done. All right, they turned it into indoor soccer on a concrete floor with carpet, okay? So it's hard to think about how you would use a curling rink, all right? So if you've got a concrete floor, you could run a summer camp in there, probably. If you got a sand base with a mat system on it, I think you're stuck.
Okay, good to
I
know.
don't know what you do. I don't know how you could, at least the one that we've got at Broomstones, I don't see how they'd be able to use that at the moment.
Okay.
So,
One dedicated club I'm aware of in their first or second year of existence, sublet their space, their concrete space to disc dugs. They never did that again, basically because they couldn't get rid of all the hair.
okay, yep, no,
And it played havoc with the curling ice.
Oh, my.
I mean, it is a challenge, okay? Now in Mayfield, they put in the ISS system. They put it in January, all right, in a leased facility, all right? And then in the spring realized there was a problem with the roof. The roof was leaking. So the landlord said they'd take that on. They ended up leaving their ice in over the summer so that the landlord could come in and work on the roof and just set up their scaffolding right on top of the ice, all right? And they left the ice in because they thought that if they did it any other way, there'd be all this dust and stuff would get down into the ISS system and they'd have to vacuum it all out. So there are some challenges when you do these systems that if you need to get in there at other times of the year, okay, with no ice on top of your mat system, you're just walking on pipes filled with glycol.
Thank you.
So I've never seen it empty. Okay, I don't know what it really looks like, but from what I can see it with ice on it, that's what it looked like. It probably looks like in the summer, right? So other things that people have as questions they wanted to ask about? So where are a bunch of you guys at as your clubs? So Kathleen, you said where is your club at this point?
We have, I believe, 60 to 70 members. We curl on Thursday nights, and we will have some 5-week Sunday afternoon leagues. We curl from December to May.
And then how far along are you in this project?
We just, the members of the ACE committee were designated by the board a few weeks ago. We met with the board 2 or 3 weeks ago and received our formal charge from them. We had our first organizational meeting a week ago. We are starting out by each member of the committee has reached out to a dedicated facility and a recently transitioned facility on fact-finding missions to try to see what the trends are and just sort of figure out what's real about this process. And this has been very informative, and I appreciate y'all for letting me attend and for sharing the information.
It's open to anybody, interested or not. So that's the thing that comes up to us is kind of, it's hard to kind of gauge where people are at in the process. When we surveyed people in the fall, it was like a lot of people said, oh yeah, we're working on this, but it was hard to tell whether they were starting to jump or they were basically on hold or what was up. It's a challenging process.
Mhm.
And it's hard to know, who's moving along at what rate. So,
Our first two attempts were very much characterized by people wanted to go out and look at buildings. That's what they wanted. They wanted to make it real right away. We are trying to be a little bit more systematic about it and to lay the groundwork in terms of informing the rest of the club as to what it will involve, and then judge interest accordingly, because everyone's excited about dedicated ice, but we have to make sure we put all the hurdles out there from the get-go so people can help us jump over them.
all right, so we're pretty close down to time. So a couple different questions. So there's another club that I can have come and talk about their experience. I'm pretty sure I can get them to come and talk about their experience transitioning. So I'll plan on doing that. Are there some specific topics that people are hot to trot that they'd like to hear more about that we haven't talked about or that should be talked about?
I appreciate this information that you shared tonight and the prior two meetings. Thank you.
So we'll just keep plugging along. Then at some point, I don't know whether it's worth having maybe we'll try and set up a talk, but have a conversation about putting together a business plan or some other topic and see if that resonates with people. But I'll see if I can't set something up. Probably most likely it won't be until April or May with another club that has transitioned in a way. So
Russell, one of the things that may be interesting, because just hearing everybody at the different points, it may be interesting to see the PowerPoint slides or the information everybody here in this group has put together to show to their boards or to show to their clubs. This way, we could kind of all steal a little bit from each other. You know, people who are further along, kind of almost like as a school right now saying, okay, here's where you are with your project. This is what we've done here. Okay, I'll present mine. This is where we are. This is where I'm on my next phase.
that's fine. If people want to just, if you've got stuff to share, if you can share within this group, that'll be great. Then I'll get my hands on it and I'll be able to either stick it somewhere or try to get it posted some way or share it with other people. I think that's true. It's very helpful to hear what other people are saying, although it seems like it's hard to do that if you're just out there on your own. Whereas if you can come to a group like this and realize, okay, wait, there's another dozen people here that all probably could benefit from seeing what you, Eric, had put together for your board, I think it'd be helpful to see some of that stuff. You know, I've tried to share some of the other stuff that I've come across. You know, I haven't gone across the feasibility study. I ran across that Bowling Green report that they had written by their college, and it basically was partly a feasibility study about, is it feasible for them to go from basically just showing up in curling and running a curling club? That was their other challenge beyond trying to find a building. So, but anytime I come across stuff, I try to just grab it and share it whenever it's possible. If people have questions, just feel free to write me and I'll see what I can find out. But I don't think I'm any expert about this in any way, shape, or form. I've talked to a few clubs and, you know, as I said earlier, everybody goes about this differently. There's no one way about it. I originally thought this should be some sort of study. Take a look at the 12 or 15 clubs that had been successful and see if you couldn't identify what were the key points that made them successful. But the more I talk to people, that seemed likely not to be easily identified. So I really appreciate people, you know, signing up for this and sharing. Like I said, I'll try to set up another one with another club. I'm not sure what else we can do, but if anybody has any other specific ideas, let me know. Any last thoughts?
Appreciate all your efforts, Russell.
Thank you
Yes,
so
thank
much.
you.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Russell.
Listen, have a nice evening.
All right.
Thank you all.